Council meeting. So now I'd like to call to order the November 1st special meeting of the Glendale City Council. Roll call, please.
Council members: Friedman.
Here.
Garpetian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Onion.
Here.
Mayor Devine.
Here. Our first item. Next.
The agenda for the November 1st, 2016 special public meeting of the City Council is posted on Thursday, October 27, 2016 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Next item is the minutes, approval of the minutes for a special City Council meeting of October 18, 2016.
See, I have to abstain from those that vote, so do I have
I'll move
those minutes?
Second.
So moved. Next item.
Minutes will stand approved as submitted unless the abstention being noted in the record. Item 2 is Director of Community Development and Fire Chief regarding adoption of 2017 Glendale Building and Safety Code. 2A is ordinance for introduction, adopting, and amending specific portions of the California Building Standards Code as the Glendale Building Code and Safety Code 2017. D is a resolution adopting findings and analysis of amendments to the California Building Standards Code, Title 24 California Code of Regulations. 2C is a resolution adopting changes to specific portions of the Glendale fiscal year 2016-17 citywide fee schedule to update references to the Glendale Building and Safety Code 2017.
Mr. Ochoa?
With a very brief introduction of this item that will be coming back for a vote, we just need to get it on the calendar as the introduction of an ordinance is our regular cyclical approval of the Building and Fire Code. Bill?
As Mr. Ochoa had suggested, this is a triannual ritual that we do. We adopt a new model of codes. It is mandated by the state that we do so. However, we are able to make certain amendments based on local climatic, geologic, or topographical conditions, which we have done every time. Staff has reviewed the codes and proposed a number of local amendments that are justified based on those different sections. The amendments are generally administrative, fire safety, life safety, and having to do with grading. The new code needs to be adopted and effective by January 1st, so we're bringing it today. We'll come back in 2 weeks for a final reading of the ordinance. The staff does recommend that you introduce the ordinance today. There are 2 other items on your agenda. The first is to adopt the findings necessary for those local amendments. That needs to be done before the ordinance, but we would suggest you do that in 2 weeks. The second is just some cleanup on our fee schedule. The code actually refers to certain sections or certain sections within our building code on fees. Those code sections are going to change, so we need to be consistent in the fee schedule. There's no change to the fee. The initial draft of the ordinance was presented to the board, to the Building and Fire Board of Appeals at 2 different meetings. That's to solicit public inquiry. To date, we have not had any inquiry. On October 19th, that board recommended unanimously that the council introduce and adopt this ordinance, this building code. I told you about the other 2 resolutions that are there for you to review, but we'd ask you to act on them next week. Last, the building official and fire marshal are here should you have any specific questions, but you have all the changes in your packet. That concludes my report.
Question, Madam Mayor.
Questions, Mr.
Yes. Today we're introducing the ordinance, right? And this local amendments that we have done, do we have a list of what they are? Because
Can you say it again?
okay, we have some state of California adopts new models codes to establish uniform standards, right? We adopt states mandates, but we added some proposed amendments, local amendments, generally fall into our categories. What are these for local code amendments that we have done? Is there a list of it, or can we know what they are?
Sure.
Because I don't know what the local changes are.
I don't have the specific ones. Jan, can you list them? And perhaps Stuart can for fire. Is he here? Jan Edwards, building official.
Hi, thank you. Councilmember Garpetian. There's not actually four specific, there are four categories of amendments. There are approximately several hundred amendments that we've got. A great majority of those are administrative in nature, and the whole ordinance comprises about 600 pages. We didn't print those out for you. We do have a copy available. The majority of the amendments that we're proposing are carryover amendments from previous building codes that Glendale has adopted. We have a few new ones, primarily because the state of California did not adopt Chapter 34 in the building code, but instead moved that to the existing building code, and we needed to include our administrative amendments in that code, which is the majority of the new amendments that are being proposed at this time.
Okay, I know there are four categories, but we don't know what the local. Okay, can we get
Yes, if you
copy of it provided to us within 2 weeks?
You have the link that goes. That way, we didn't print 600 pages for all of you. But we'll be happy to sit with you afterwards and have Stuart and Jen go through them as you would like to be in as much detail as possible.
Thank you. Because the reason I'm asking is because sometimes somebody's trying to do a project and they come up and say, how come you're doing this way? So you just approved it, and I wanted to know what we are approving basically on a local level. I know this on a state level it's mandated we can't change anything, but what are we adding or changing on a local level? I would like to know what we're doing.
Well, I'd like to, are there any amendments that are really either far-reaching or really a change in the opposite direction than we've been in the past, or are they all just kind of the usual?
Okay. We have, like I said, for the most part, they are duplication of amendments that we've had in previous code. The biggest change in those amendments has to do with our trash and recycling requirements. In order to comply with state regulations that went into effect in April of this year, what we had in our building code was going to be insufficient and would create problems with new projects trying to comply with those requirements. So that is a major change. The rest of the changes are simply, for the most part, carryovers. Rather than reading through the whole 600 pages of the document, at the end, the justifications provide us a brief summary of each code amendment and an explanation as to what its justification is, whether it's administrative, geologic, climatic, to be able to adopt it. And that summary itself is about 30 pages, so it would be an easier way to go through. And again, that link was provided for everyone to easily access that document.
Paula? Thank you. Councilmember Friedman?
Yeah, a few times in the past I've brought up the desire to have a conversation about requiring new developments to incorporate more stormwater aquifer recharge requirements, as many cities do at this point in the drought, to make sure that stormwater is retained on site and not flushed into storm drains to go out to the ocean. When is that coming back to us?
Beyond the LID ordinance, the low impact development ordinance that's already been adopted, the one that would go beyond that, I have to look at the list of council directives.
Okay.
As I sit here, I couldn't tell you.
Okay, well, let's make sure that at some point it comes back in time for us to adopt it under one of these schedules.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
At this point, it's just, like I said, reading the justifications does give a brief summary and would make it easier to go through quickly to identify what the purpose and the topic of each amendment is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right. So we just need an introduction of the ordinance for today. So do I have someone that would like to introduce this ordinance?
I'll introduce the ordinance.
Second?
That's all I
No
need.
second,
Just
then it's
back in.
introduced.
All the
The other
items will come back
two
on the 15th.
resolutions will come back in 2 weeks. Thank you. Next item.
Item 3 is Director of Community Development regarding update and overview of the proposals received from the developers that responded to the request for proposals to preserve and develop city-owned property located at the former Rockhaven Sanitarium at 2713 Honolulu Avenue, parcel numbers 5610-024-900 through 910.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, before we get started, I just want to say that this is a very important discussion we're about to have, and presentations to be made on the preservation and development of Rockhaven. We'll be looking at concepts today and there will be no decision made, so that everyone understands that. To move through the process smoothly and to enable everyone the opportunity to voice your opinion and in an orderly and fair way, I'd like to proceed in the following way. First, staff will give their report, Mr. Ochoa and Ms. Sanchez, an in-depth explanation of the projects and proposals. Then the developers will have 5 minutes to expound on your proposals, and then I will allow speakers, and we have quite a few, 3 minutes each to voice your opinions. As a courtesy to the speakers, I would like to ask my fellow council members to maybe let them present their proposals uninterrupted. I'm asking you to please hold your questions until the end, if possible, and then we can ask questions. I'd like to double check with Mr. Garcia based on the disclaimer, the disclosure forms. No one on council is to be recused. Has a conflict.
I don't have any information that any of the council members have a conflict.
Great. Okay. Then we're ready to go, and let's begin. Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. This is the much anticipated RFP process that we'll go through in just a second. You used an important word that I think I just want to reemphasize as Darlene gets ready to make her presentation. What we're talking about today is the concept use. And further, to the extent that we are just talking and not making a recommendation, or the council not making a decision today, I think it's important to call that out. At every step of this particular process, it has been relatively slow going, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, to be sure. To the extent that council had directed previously that you wanted an opportunity to, as the Brown Act dictates, hear the information together so that you can ask questions sitting together as a city council.
Can we turn the phones off, please? Thank you.
That we would have a public meeting. And so here that public meeting is, and it is being held 2 weeks in advance of the decision point that we have on the schedule for the City Council, meaning in the evening of November 15th is when we would bring back a recommendation to you for the Council's discussion and approval of a recommendation or no recommendation, as the situation might call for. Secondly, I think it's important to call out that, per Council's direction, the proposals minimally redacted, and I think only one even was redacted for proprietary information, were made available to the public last Wednesday and advertised by way of a press release. So at this point, we know, for example, that through our social media apparatus, over 1,100 people or addresses received the notification. 580 then visited the website, and hundreds of those people actually clicked through the various development proposals that you will see in just a second. The point being that the idea here is to put information out. You will have, at the conclusion of this session, this information-only session, an FAQ of frequently asked questions that will incorporate all the things that we think folks might want to know, as well as any insightful questions that we hear from the public that weren't already anticipated. And we'll put that on the website, and we will advertise that so that over the next 2 weeks, people that have questions can call and ask those questions. They can email at their convenience in the middle of the night if they choose and get a response back. And so when we get back to the 15th, everyone has all of that same information, because it will be, pursuant to this process, very transparent and all in the public eye. So with that, I'll turn it over to our Deputy Director of Economic Development, Darlene Sanchez, who will walk through this process.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. As Mr. Ochoa said, I'm going to present a summary of the proposals we received after a 7-month RFP, or request for proposal, process. I'm going to do a very brief overview of the history of Rock Haven. I'm going to highlight the RFP process, and then I'll summarize the 7 proposals. Following this presentation, we'll reconvene with this discussion on November 15th in the evening, and at that time, there is recommendation, the selection committee would make the recommendation at that time. So really, Rock Haven has garnered the interest of this community because, large in part, to its history. In 1923 is when Agnes Richards founded Rock Haven and operated the property as a private gated women's facility that specialized in mental health. In April of 2008 is when the city purchased the property for $8.25 million. The primary reason at that time was to protect the historically significant buildings from being part of any type of development where they would be demolished. Since that time, with any asset of this caliber, there are several property maintenance costs that the city has undertaken. Tree trimming of the many beautiful oak trees on that property, maintenance of the vegetation, security of the site. There's also been some very minimal infrastructure repairs done. While there have been many discussion over the years on what to do with the property, no long-term planning or programming has ever been determined. One such discussion did involve the development of the site into a library, yet with the County of LA opening a library about half a mile from this discussion has really been curtailed. Another overarching issue that has impacted this discussion, has been part of this discussion, has been the slow economic recovery of this recession that was compounded with the end of redevelopment. That has really made funding any sizable rehabilitation of the property very difficult. So recognizing these difficulties with funding, a plan to look for some type of solution to rehabilitate these buildings was crafted. You can see here on the timeline, after the city's purchased in 2008, in 2014 is when the city commenced looking for this type of solution through a RFQ, or requests for qualifications process.
It's probably important, and I promise I won't jump into it. It's important, I think, to recognize, as Darlene had indicated, that we purchased this property ostensibly to preclude it from development. The ideas about what might be done with the property followed that decision to purchase the property. So our rationale for use occurred after the fact, and as Darlene had indicated, to the extent that there's been discussions about any number of things, particularly the library, with the amount of time that elapsed between 08 and 14, the county's opening of a library on Foothill Boulevard effectively negates the need to expand the library that we have in Montrose today, let alone, for whatever reason, the idea that we would expand the fire station that today doesn't need to be expanded. And so we have this asset that exists, and we will decide ultimately as a community what to do with it. But it's also worth noting, in terms of the RFQ process that was put in place in 14, the council took a very unprecedented step to put forward a process different from this process. What we have before you is an RFP, request for proposal. What we had then was a request for qualifications. So we beat the bushes asking, and as sitting on that committee, asking for folks in the development community who among you could do an adaptive reuse of this site, because first and foremost we wanted to maintain the buildings that are on site, the oak trees that are on site, and have some fit into the neighborhood. We looked for a wide range of different types of uses, from institutional users like schools, and we got one of those submittals as a request for qualification submittal. Asking for hotels, there were none. Asking for housing developments, which there were quite a few. Asking for boutique retail, which there was a couple. But the unique part of that RFQ process is that the City Council had directed the staff, and the staff then communicated to this ad hoc evaluation committee of community members that if we couldn't come to consensus, that the process would effectively stop. And it did. At that time, in September of 14, as you see here, the committee came close, thought really hard about possibly moving forward with a particular project, requesting a proposal from that proponent of qualifications, but just couldn't bring themselves to do it. And so, true to your word, as City Council, the process stopped. Now, that was 2 years ago. And we had stated that nothing really would ever happen. We couldn't foresee anything happening with the site for at least a year. And indeed, nothing really did. Other folks, other community interests tried to raise money, tried to do other things that would provide the opportunity for them to fulfill their vision for the site. But none of that really came to fruition. So after an abundance of time, we put together this RFP process.
Yes, so let's look at the RFP process. Since releasing the RFP in mid-March, this process has included 3 site tours as well as 4 extensions. Again, the community engagement and identifying the best future strategy for solutions has been at the forefront. If there was an opportunity where we thought we could expand the pool of candidates, we would extend that timeline. Or if we thought there was adding an additional development scenario would be in the best interest of the site, we would expand that timeline. Like Mr. Ochoa said earlier, there's been a very slow and steady march as we look to the private sector to come up with a solution that could rehabilitate these buildings. With that, the final deadline was closed on August 11th of this year. So, in looking at the selection and grading criteria, we received 7 very, very different proposals. What I want to highlight on this slide here is this is the evaluation criteria. So this was the evaluation criteria that was presented to Council in February when we first issued the RFP. This is from pages 9 and 10 of the RFP where we go into the criteria. As you can see, it's very heavily weighted to give preference on the items that the City Council wanted to see in this, mainly the dedication to preservation and the creation of open space and accessibility on this property. These 2 metrics alone count for 50% of the scoring. There's other obviously relevant criteria here, developer experience, compatibility with the neighborhood, return on investment, as well as points for use for community groups. The system here with this grading criteria, there's a possible score of 120 points. Within each large category, you can see there's also a specific breakdown. This is from page 9 of the RFP. I'm not going to go into every subsector, but what I want to illustrate here is that there's a description and there's criteria, and you can see how these points will be graded and assigned per proposal. Further with an RFP process as opposed to an RFQ, it calls for more focused solution scenarios. As we look to rehabilitate the site, we put these 3 scenarios in the RFP. The first is a medical and mental health facility that would really restore the historic use associated with the site. The second was what we described as a boutique lifestyle commercial center, which would include any low-density elements of shopping, dining, or living. And the third option, referred to as other development and a park scenario, calls for development on the vacant western portion of the site with the preservation of the eastern side of the property for use as a public park. This is the map that was in the RFP. It illustrates the Rockhaven property as well as the location of the assets within that property. There are a total of 14 buildings labeled from A through N on this map. There's also an entry gate and several prominent oak trees. Special care was taken to note the significance of this entry gate as well as the oak trees. As I stated before, rehabilitation of the historically significant building is a critical component of this RFP. However, there are 3 buildings that have been deemed as having low historical and or architectural integrity. Those are buildings A, B, and L, and you'll see they're hash marked on that map. Also of note on this map is this blue area. There is a well owned by GWP. This blue area really is just an approximation of the footprint. There are specific regulatory requirements by the State Water Board, so this area may likely be altered. The firms that proposed were not aware of it at the time that they submitted their proposal, but were made aware of it during their oral interview. All of them are aware at this point, and all of them had said if there was any type of alterations that could be made, they would be able to do that. So again, some of these concepts would have to be altered. So as a result of this RFP process, we received these 7 different concepts. What they did is they outlined their strategy of how they would rehab these buildings. Once the proposals were submitted, the selection committee received these written proposals and reviewed those proposals, and then we interviewed each of these firms. The 7 summaries are part of your council report, and then what I'm going to do is go through some bullet points of what those summaries say. Since the proposal submittals, 3 firms have offered clarifying comments since their last interview. I did not include those clarifying comments in this summary. So again, what we've done is we've included what was in their written proposal as well as what was elaborated on during their oral interview. They're all listed in alphabetical order. And again, what we're looking for here is big picture. I want to showcase some of the general terms that were presented. There are going to be some very specific details that may have been spared just to be more concise, and again, draw out the bigger picture of what is being presented in these proposals. RFP shows us qualifications and experience, but like I said, just delve into very conceptual ideas of what their strategy would be to do this. So let's look at the first one. The first is Avalon Investment Company. It's a Los Feliz-based real estate development and management firm that was established in the 70s. They're partnering with Creative Space, who is a hybrid real estate marketing, architectural, and contractual service company. Other team members include an architect, Brenda Levin, who specializes in historic restoration, as well as landscape architect Mia Lair. Their proposed hotel operator is Eastside Establishment, whose most recent project was Hotel Cavell in Eagle Rock. What they're proposing is called the Retreat at Rock Haven. It encompasses 45 all-suite boutique hotels with a community garden. It creates 10,000 square feet of new construction, generally located on the southern half of the property, and I'll show you the site map on the next slide. But what this retreat will include is a swimming pool, open space, gardens, an indoor-outdoor wedding and community event space, as well as a spa, fitness studio, bicycle rental, a dining center, and an artist's cottage and museum. This museum would include art-related programming and pay tribute to the history of Rock Haven. As part of the deal points, they're offering $4,125,000 as a purchase price. They've also projected transit occupancy tax that would be paid as part of this use. Here is the site plan. On the site plan here, you can see that the new construction is denoted in the darker red, which is on the southern portion of the property, and the areas of light red or pink are the rehabilitated Rock Haven units that would be utilized for the hotel. A valet and self-parking surface lot is proposed on the southwest portion of the site with access from Honolulu. Thank you. All Rock Haven buildings, gates, and walls will be preserved with the exception of Building L, which would be available, which would serve as for their check-in. All grounds will be available to the public, and the site will also be restored and enhanced with culturally significant landscaping. Another thing of note is the retreat at Rock Haven will also provide bicycles to be used by patrons to ride to Montrose Shopping Park. The next proposal that is listed here is Brook Street. It's a real estate company that was founded in 2002, and they're partnering with a lab, which is a real estate development company responsible for such projects as the Hanaheim Packing House, as well as Plant 51 in San Jose. What they're presenting is Terraza at Rock Haven, which is a boutique lifestyle commercial center that includes 30 bungalow-style courtyard residential units that range in size from 450 to 900 square feet. One thing I'd want to note here is that their performa states 24 residential units, while their site plan has 30. Again, this was in response to the discussion of the well. So you may see this in some of the proposals. But what they do is they call for rehabilitation of all the historically significant buildings. The outdoor areas will be used for locally based retail spaces such as a coffee roaster, microbrewery, farmer's market, a wine room, outdoor dining, as well as an organic kitchen, boutique shops, and an art gallery. There's also a wellness component that's really described throughout their proposal, so they include a spa, a yoga center as well. And they do designate a building for a community group meeting space. They've also talked about a trolley that would go to Montrose Shopping Park, and the lab, who are their partners on this, would be the management company. What they're offering is a $2 million purchase price. Here on the site plan, you could see where the residential units will be located on the southwest portion of the site. This housing is going to be catered towards, it's going to be workforce housing, really drawing from the employees and the owners of the retail eateries on this property. The proposal includes the development of a parking lot that could accommodate 140 spaces on the southeast corner as well as the southwest perimeter of this property. Again, they're proposing to rehabilitate all historically significant buildings, but would be replacing A and B with the residential uses. Next is Cliffside Malibu. They're a developer and operator of substance abuse facilities. They have a team that includes Goldman Firth Rossi Architects, who specializes in master planning and development, as well as Fonda Benardi and Homan, who specializes in residential architecture and historical preservation. They're proposing to operate the facility as a high-end drug and alcohol treatment center. 50 of the beds would be placed in the rehabilitated buildings, and then as part of a second phase, they would accommodate another 50 beds on the western portion of the parcel. The grounds would have more limited accessibility, but there would be an outdoor area that would be made available to the general public during more normal business hours. What they're proposing is a $6 million purchase price, as well as a share in some of their profits over a 15-year period with a $12 million max. If you look at their site plan here, it would rehabilitate all of the historically significant buildings, and then with buildings A, B, and L, those would be replaced and incorporated into their property. On the where the green is shown, that's where they would do their future development of low-rise residential hall. It would have a recreational facility as well as parking. Next is David Hawk. David Hawk is a Los Angeles-based real estate development company. They're led by Mr. Hawk. He's a partner with Inspire Communities, who is owner and manager of manufactured housing communities. They have a list of medical operators from the mental health field with a team of doctors that include Dr. Timothy Pilko, Dr. Annette Emshar, as well as Dr. Asher Goetzman. What they are proposing to do is really inpatient psychiatric residential treatment facility. Mental disorders would be treated at this facility, specifically mood, anxiety, and personality disorders. The development concept really also mimics the original use of Rockhaven as it was originally constructed. Most of the small residential buildings would be restored as new residential group homes, and the larger buildings would be restored for administration and therapy uses. The campus would be open during the day, but there may be some limitations to complete access to the property. And there would be one general building would be used and be made available for the public. And their deal points is that they are offering an $8.6 million purchase price, and they've also designated themselves as a tax-paying entity versus a nonprofit. If you look here at their site plan, the space, the box on the western portion is where they would build a subterranean garage. On top of the garage is where they would build the new facilities for client medical services. And then also of note is the 40-foot strip that's facing Honolulu. This space would be dedicated to open space for community use. Next is Ganji Design Let Build. They're a Burbank-based development with an architect and construction company. Their team includes Joseph Catalana, who is an architect that specializes in preservation, Eagle Restorations Group, which is a historic reservation and preservation firm, and Evergreen Landscape Architect, who specializes in open space landscaping. The nonprofit group Friends of Rockhaven will serve as an advisor to this project. As part of their proposal, what they're proposing is a boutique lifestyle commercial center that calls for community space, 20,000 square feet of retail opportunities, farm-to-table garden cultivations, as well as a space for local groups such as the Historical Society of Crescenta Valley and the Glendale Historical Society to meet. Community partnerships were at the cornerstone of their proposal. They've listed 10 community groups as partners and detail another set of organizations that could be potential tenants, such as Dub Lab, which is an online radio station, Poetic Research and Poetic Research Bureau. Ganji's also proposing the creation of the Friends of Rockhaven Museum, and has listed Friends of Rockhaven as the advisor of all aspects of the proposal and process. The Gelsinger family will help manage the retail shops and the farm-to-table eateries. The surface parking lot will have access from Honolulu and is being proposed on the southwest corner of the property. No purchase price or ground lease is offered for this, but what they have done is they have shown taxable sale that would be made off of their commercial endeavors. As part of the taxable sales, that sales tax would translate to about $50,000 a year to the city. So when you look at their site plan, they called for also the rehabilitation of all the historic buildings, walls, and gates, with the exception of L, which is not deemed as historically significant. They would use that as an outdoor patio and a cooking area. And then the southern section would be used as a park. And again, you can see the black box, which would be where the surface parking lot would be located. So next is Metro Investment. Metro is a Glendale-based residential and commercial real estate company that is proposing a boutique lifestyle commercial center and park concept. On their team is Historic Resources Group, which is a historic preservation consulting firm, Pasco, a national real estate firm, and Dwayne Border Design, which is a landscape architect. What they're proposing is called the Rockhaven Village and Park concept with three major components. So what they will do is rehabilitate the existing Rockhaven buildings into a boutique retail village. They'll create a new public park, and they will develop 36 three-story first-time home buyer residential units on the vacant portion of the site. The proposal also calls for a park community room, Friends of Rockhaven Clubhouse, and you're going to have professional office listed as well as the new public park. They are developing it with these three components. Their deal points, they are not offering a purchase price. What they are asking, or what they've shown, is a loan by the city. But what they would do is they would build the housing units. They would sell off those units, and at that point they would rehab the retail units and then create the park. The city would maintain ownership of the property during this time.
During which time?
I'm sorry. The city would maintain ownership of the entire property except for the housing that would be sold off individually. And at some point in the future, there would be a first right of refusal with Metro so that they could purchase the property. So here, they are preserving all the buildings with historical significance. A and B would be incorporated as part of the housing. And pedestrian and traffic and vehicular entrances for the residential home would be accessed from Hermosa Avenue and Honolulu Avenue, but each of the residential homes would have their own separate guest parking spots. Okay. And then last, we have Summit Senior Life. They're proposing a medical mental health concept that creates 159 assisted senior living and support services. Summit Senior Life provides entitlement, acquisition, development, and management to and with the senior living community. Other members of their team include Starting Gate, which provides professional consulting services to public agencies, Irwin Partners Architects, and Near Cal Construction, which is a commercial construction firm. This senior living campus has three components. First, the Agnes Richards Memorial Public Park, which would be developed and then transferred back to the city. Then you have your senior living campus, which would be a majority of where the rehabilitated buildings would be. They would rehab those buildings for more independent living, and then they would build on the vacant parcel 108 assisted living units with memory care units. The square footage on those units range anywhere from 416 to 990 square feet. They're proposing to relocate the gate and the memorial rose plants to the Agnes Richards Memorial Park, but they would want feedback, and it would be designed by the Friends of Rockhaven and any other interested parties. The park would also include Building M. Like I said, that would be where the museum would be identified, and what they've offered is a $5 million purchase price. As you can see here on the site plan, where the vacant property is, that's where they're proposing a 3-story building. And that's where you would have your assisted care, your memory care, and then they would rehabilitate the existing Rockhaven structures for independent living units, with the exception of Building N, which would be is proposed to be demolished as part of this improvement.
Where's the well on that site plan?
The well is right there where most of those units. During their oral interviews, when we told them that the well is impacted on this, and what they said is, of course, they would rearrange and work with us on that. It would impact the purchase price associated with this, but it would be something that they would come back and look at if instructed to do so. So with that, like I said, that's a very short summary of what were very extensive, very different proposals. But those proposals were released to the public last Tuesday. So after this meeting, as part of this process, what we will do is put together an FAQ, or a frequently asked questions sheet, based on both council comments and community comments. That FAQ sheet will also go up where the proposals are listed on the website. And then, like I said earlier, the next step after that would be on November 15th, when the selection committee would present any recommendations. So this is a note and file report, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Before we hear from the developers, does anyone have a comment, question?
Madam Mayor, I do have a comment about the process that we're going to witness in a few minutes. Was it your predisposition that all the applying entities give their presentations, then we ask questions? Or can we ask them questions as they are presenting?
We can ask. Why don't we let them speak, and then we can ask questions?
Yes. Subsequently
yes, we'll
to each presentation.
Let them speak uninterrupted if we can, and then we'll ask them questions.
Okay. And in general, I'm just a little concerned about the fact that council members, and me specifically, I've been out of the country, just came back. I've had a very short amount of time to familiarize myself with the materials, and I just had my briefing literally an hour ago with another council member. And I mean, I'm sure we're all going to do our best, but it seems like they're going to present, we're going to have an opportunity to ask questions and comment, but then 2 weeks later, staff's going to come back with a recommendation. So it seems like our input is somewhat limited as a result of that. So I'm just expressing my concern about that. Maybe the process goes seamlessly, maybe it goes smoothly, but I don't know.
Well, I had some equal concerns. Does anyone else have a comment on that?
I have a comment, not on that in particular,
okay.
But I'd like to remind everyone who's an applicant and members on the council that there are strict prohibitions of communication by anyone who's applying with anyone on the city council. And I've received some emails and some feelers from certain applicants, and I want you to know that I didn't respond to you because it is inappropriate for anyone on the council to have any communication with any applicant. Is that correct, Mr. City Attorney?
That's correct. Other than the process of writing to the council during this process, as part of these public meetings, individual contacts with council members is listed as a prohibited activity in the RFP.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the same note, we were all received a letter from our city attorney indicating that we can't have any contact or communication or closed-door meetings with any of the applicants, and I received a couple of emails as well and didn't respond either. But today, are we going to hear from the applicants first, or are you going to hear from the public first?
From the applicants, the developers first.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. City Attorney, if the communication an applicant has been not just a communication but a phone conference that follows that doesn't go into the substance of it, does that constitute a conflict?
The RFP, strictly, as Mr. Najari noted, strictly prohibits contact regarding the proposals. If you want, I can read the language, but it is pretty broad. Right. So it says after the release of the after the release of the RFP, except as the RFP allows, so including the process that Ms. Sanchez described, a proposer must not communicate in any manner with individuals listed in paragraph 1.1, which includes the City Council, unless authorized by the City. Proposers and their representatives are not prohibited, however, from making oral statements or presentations in public to one or more of representatives of the City during a public meeting. So for this meeting, obviously, and for the meeting on the 15th. In addition, proposers may write to the City Council as a whole once the staff recommendations are made in anticipation of a public meeting. So that's the extent. It's pretty broad. It's regarding the whole, regarding the proposals in response to the RFP.
So if the communication is to say that we can't meet, we can't talk about this, that's fine, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And if you do, what happens at that time?
Well,
Not me.
And I trust that given that the advisement, as Mr. Najari noted, the advisement, and I think actually Councilman Garcetti noted it too, given that the advisement from our office, once the proposals were released to the public, council members were made aware, but our proposers can be excluded from the process at the discretion of the council at the point that's determined they've made a communication with any council member in violation of the RFP. So that would obviously be subject to the council's decision at the time it comes to make a decision on the project.
I have a question for the mayor.
Yes.
So just so I understand what's going to happen in 2 weeks. So today we're just hearing presentations. The public will speak. We all go think, do our due diligence, look through the binder, ask any questions of staff, not of the applicants, right? Because there's no, a blackout still. So then in 2 weeks, I'm assuming the applicants come back. So if after this time we have more questions, we'll be able to ask questions in public.
Sure.
The public will speak again, and then we'll decide if we do an ENA, which is not a deal. It's just sort of saying, it's kind of, as you like to put it, going steady.
Going exclusive for 6 months' time. We're not going to see anybody
steady,
else.
But you don't get married.
Correct.
So 2 weeks we don't get married. We sort of go steady and then say, like, do we want to maybe consummate this relationship at the end of 6 months?
In a
and
very
during that
respectable way.
time, things can still fall apart or change. It'll come back after those 6 months and we say, well, we decided that we like this and don't like this. We're going to change it. And then we have another public hearing at the end of that 6 months and then decide if we get married.
Effectively, yes. That's why the key word I think the mayor used at the beginning was concept.
Right. So we begin now with the concept. That's why these are not that fully formed, where they're, we don't have architectural renderings. We don't have a real project. We have concepts, and then we pick a concept to go steady with for 6 months. Mm-hmm. Try it out, go out to dinner a few times, sit down, and then at the end of that, we have another public process. Okay, so I think it's important that we all understand that this is the beginning of this, not the end. Even the 2 weeks will be the beginning of the process, not the end of the process. Okay,
And if I can add to that, that during the 2 weeks, if there are any organizations or groups or people out there that have questions and you want to meet with staff to ask questions, you can call and make those appointments, and staff will come out and speak to you about all of the proposals, any of the proposals, one of the proposals. I ask that sometime before we get to the ENA, that we get a little bit more information, and I've talked to you about this, the short-term, long-term impact of financially. You know, I think one of our goals is that this should be financially sustainable. And so I think it's important for us to know where each one of these proposals stand, if we can, before the ENA.
That would be difficult in the context of an ENA because a private equity developer might not want to play the best hand that they have until and unless they know we are going steady, that we have a relationship that if I put my best deal on the table, you're not just going to leverage that against somebody else. Because once you do get to an ENA, negotiation being what it is, we're going to use that as our starting position and try to leverage even further, be it for improvements or amenities or give it a name. And so the idea of saying, I'm going to pick on Seaside, you said was not here right now? Cliffside. Cliffside is not here right now. Everyone was notified, but they are coming from the other side of town, so maybe they're in transit. If they said, well, I can increase or decrease the beds, which increases or decreases the amount that they'd be willing to pay or the height of the building, a lot of that is going to come out by way of the ENA process. And during that 6-month period, as we're having charrettes there at Rockhaven, and folks are giving all kinds of feedback that says, 3 stories isn't that big a deal on the Honolulu side, but it's absolutely a big deal on the Hermosa side. That changes some of the fundamentals. And so, you put it beautifully at the beginning, Madam Mayor. The bigger question for you right now is looking at that criteria that you established and looking at these very different concepts that we have. What do you want to do? Because that ENA process may ultimately work out where we're going to be in this very boat in 6 months' time, or 6 months and 2 weeks' time, to say, that one didn't work out. Let's go someplace else. I wish I could give you a more definitive answer, but it's an imperfect world.
Okay. So any other comments? And we'll just go ahead to the developers and hear what they have to say about their proposals. So let's start with Avalon developer. Weston, I think it's Cookler.
Madam Mayor, how many minutes would you like to give them?
5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Weston Cookler. I'm a principal with Avalon Investment Company. On behalf of Avalon and Creative Space, I'd like to thank the staff for their presentation and the City Council for considering our proposal, The Retreat at Rockhaven. What distinguishes our proposal are 3 main points: experience, accessibility, and economic benefit. I'll start with experience. Our development team is led by the most awarded and accomplished designers specializing in historic and iconic projects: architect Brenda Levin, landscape architect Mia Lair, and interior designer Sally Breer. Led by these women, we intend to restore the concept of sanctuary and community at Rockhaven. By preserving, rehabilitating, and maintaining the historic architecture and landscape, using Rockhaven's history to inform our designs, and enhancing the property's public access and amenities. And we have the experience to execute on our proposal. We have designed, developed, constructed, and operated significant mixed-use, adaptive reuse, historic preservation projects before here in Glendale and across the LA region, which is why our project is endorsed by the Glendale Historical Society. Next, accessibility. The public will have access to the entire property. And beyond that, they will have the ability to use and interact with the historic landscape and buildings. Just as Agnes Richards intended, patrons will again use the historic rooms and landscapes as a place of rest and renewal. The Artist Cottage and Museum is designed for public programming, emphasizing arts education and inviting in community groups to host their events. Because there is no housing as part of our proposal and no medical, rehabilitation, or psychiatric uses, we do not need to limit or restrict the public's access to the grounds. Finally, economic benefit. The development in our proposal will yield the highest return on the city's investment, and it will be an ongoing and significant new source of tax revenue. In our proposal and in our pro forma, you'll see that the annual transient occupancy tax generated in our first year of occupancy is $465,000. That's a new source of tax revenue, 12% of gross receipts from each bedroom stay, and it goes directly to the city of Glendale, not to the state, the federal government, or the county, directly to Glendale. Glendale will be generating an 11% yield on its remaining dollars invested, and over the course of 30 years, we project $22 million will be generated in TOT tax for the city of Glendale. There will also be sales taxes and property taxes, but only a small portion of that returns to the city. We can spur economic development and growth with long-term permanent job creation, local employment opportunities, increased tourism, and bringing in new businesses like for corporate retreats that want to host events, family or friends visiting the La Crescenta Valley, or getaway vacationers looking for a unique Southern California neighborhood. The retreat is a point of entry for new shoppers to Honolulu Avenue and Spar Heights without creating a competing retail district that would dilute existing businesses. So we've assembled a world-class team of women designers to work on this, led by Brenda Levin, Mia Lair, and Sally Breer. Our use allows for the maximum public access. And with real and tangible financial benefits, we will be able to fund the rehabilitation and maintain the ongoing maintenance responsibilities, all the while providing Glendale with a significant new source of tax revenue. I know I can speak for the team when I tell you how passionately we feel about Rockhaven and how much responsibility we put on ourselves and the importance of preserving it and making it accessible to the community. We get it. We see its quintessential California beauty, and we celebrate its history. The retreat at Rockhaven will preserve Agnes's legacy and create the next iconic destination in the city of Glendale. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions from council?
I have two. First, you mentioned other historic properties in Glendale or nearby. Can you tell us what those are? Because I'm not familiar with what you've done in Glendale. And secondly, can you just briefly give us some examples of the work of the designers?
Yes. Our most recent two projects were the adaptive reuse creative office building in Glendale called the Irving Airchute Factory. It was a 1929 building that was built as an airplane parachute factory for the airport that used to exist in the where the Disney campus is now. We received the 2015 Glendale Historical Society Preservation Award for that project. It's a mix of use of office, soundstage, editing suite, and a restaurant.
On San Fernando and...
It's on Flower and Sonora. And our restaurant opened about 2 weeks ago. We also, Creative Space, my partner developer, just completed Hauserworth and Schimmel. It's a 115,000 square foot adaptive reuse historic preservation of the Global Mills factory in the Arts District. It now contains an art gallery, public art space, classroom, retail center, a hotel for artists, and a restaurant, Manuela, which features a garden designed by Mia Lair and also recently opened a couple weeks ago. Just as a background on Mia Lair and Brenda Levin, our architect and landscape architect, both of them have worked on Dodger Stadium. Mia has done the Glendale Animation Studio where Disney is, their outdoor landscaping. She's worked on hotels, the Roosevelt Hotel in Hollywood. Brenda Levin is maybe one of the most accomplished historic preservationists working in Los Angeles. She's most notable also for Dodger Stadium, also for the Bradbury Building in downtown, Grand Central Market in downtown. She's done, exactly. She is extremely accomplished in historic preservation. And our list of her projects are in our proposal, and I encourage you to look through them.
Any other questions? Okay. Councilmember Kedian.
It was indicated in the presentation that there will be an indoor-outdoor wedding. Is this where that event center is in your site plan? And if you can tell us just a little bit about it, how big it is, how many people, and what kind of plan, and also I'm going to ask. I have two questions. I'm going to ask both of them so you can answer them at the same time. The park area. I mean, the accessibility to public. We said it will be open to public because this is not like those hotels that it's walled on 4 sides and everything is gated. So if you can elaborate on that, and I appreciate your passion. I can tell you're very passionate about this project. So
Thank you.
I really appreciate that.
As you can see in our site plan, all outdoor spaces are available to the public. Our vision is that if you come to our restaurant and want to stroll the property, we welcome you to do that. If you come to the Artist Cottage for an event that a local community group is hosting, we welcome you to explore the property. We want to, because the air and the environment there is so beautiful, we want to offer outdoor experiences for our other uses. So in our event hall, which you see in the bottom left, it's 4,000 square feet. So it's on the smaller side. We have a rendering of it in our proposal. We are keeping it small in nature to conform to the existing zoning. The outdoor is a place, we expect that a groom and a bride will meet in Agnes's garden, which we put in the middle of the site plan, get married there, and then have a cocktail hour outside the event hall, and then come inside the event hall for dancing.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I was going to ask you to elaborate on the hospitality events or the host events that, I'm sorry, how large did you say that building was?
It's estimated 4,000 square feet.
Oh, okay. And you said that there could possibly be business events there or conferences?
Yeah, we hope to attract corporate retreats as a potential source of revenue.
Any other questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your proposal. Very nice. And our next speaker will be Hauk Daniel Swartz.
Thank you, Mayor Devine and members of City Council and staff. Special shout out to the people at staff who did an amazing job of reading through all this information and coming up with some really very good summaries. I'm not going to summarize our specific proposal. It's there for people to read. But I have been fascinated by reading all the proposals, by all of the submissions, dedication to talking about the heritage and purpose of Rockhaven and the original founder, which was really about mental health and wellness. And while it's clear that Ms. Richards believed that good architecture and good landscaping was important to helping people make it through their process of regaining mental health, that's not really the purpose of Rockhaven. What Rockhaven is about is helping people who have issues dealing with daily life get back into society in a humane and caring and beautiful setting. I think that's the issue that we need to look at. I've been impressed. I've been going to a lot of the public hearings in the neighborhood, here, various other places related to Rockhaven. At each one of those, somebody either makes a public statement or comes up to me afterwards in private and says, I wish this would have been available to somebody in my family or somebody in my circle of friends who didn't get the help they needed or can't get the help they need now. And unfortunately, in the period of time since Rockhaven was conceived till now, we actually have got less access to good public mental health facilities than we did decades ago. And it's always discussed how we need to do it. It's always part of the discussion when we have public events where something goes wrong. It's part of the discussion when we talk about homeless. It's part of the discussion we talk about all kinds of mental health related issues. But we never seem to get to a point of actually making the commitment to do it. We're not a real estate scheme. We're a group of mental health professionals who have had success in Southern California in making people's lives better. And that's what we're committed to do. We're committed to, I'm an architect. I believe in adaptive reuse of historic buildings. I've done several myself. But we're not proposing adaptive reuse. We're opposing reuse. we are going to take the existing buildings back to what would initially be a 50-bed, 50-bedroom facility, residential care with on-site medical facilities, rehabilitation facilities, and on-site residential support, so that people have an opportunity to experience what Rockhaven was when it was started and what it was all the way up to the time that it was closed. And I think that's the real tribute to the legacy of what Rockhaven has been. Any questions?
I just have a quick question, and I'm sorry, I'm sure this was in your submittal. So you mentioned public facility a few times. Are you a public facility or a private facility?
We're a private facility. It's a for-profit operation. It is not a 501c3, although we will start a separate 501c3 to help fund people who are not able to, mostly whose insurance does not cover full coverage. But it is a private facility with private doctors.
I only asked because you mentioned the lack of public mental health facilities a few times, so I was a little thrown.
Bad use of words on my part.
Thanks.
Mr. Garpetian.
Quick question. You mentioned it's 50-bedroom, 50-bed facility. Is there a plan to increase the number of beds in the future? Or
we have talked to the medical staff, and there's a need for several million in the United States. So there's a well that you could never run dry in terms of potential patients. And the thought was increasing it up to maybe as high as 60 beds with more outpatient facilities, but that would require the construction of new buildings on what is currently the vacant land. That would require subterranean parking. That is a big step that may never actually occur. Our initial underwriting, our proposal for the purchase price, and our analysis of how well the facility works is based on taking the existing buildings, the significant buildings, restoring them essentially to what they've always been, which is multi-bed small cottages with a central dining facility and several central treatment buildings, and using vacant land for a couple of uses. One, this public well, which is not going to be available for use. And we use a major strip of the vacant land across the front of Honolulu as landscaped public park. And we do that for the entire frontage, but that does take a large portion of the vacant land. We end up with probably the ability to park in a well-landscaped surface parking lot around 100 cars, which is about what the facility would require to make sure that no one who comes to visit, no staff, whatever, needs to go park on the street.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam.
Any other questions? Councilmember Najarian?
So you mentioned Rockhaven's previous uses. So is it your assertion then that your use of Rockhaven would be the purest use of preservation because you're continuing the healthcare and sanitarium aspect that made it famous?
My answer to that is yes.
Interesting.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for
you.
your submittal. Next is the Summit Senior Life, A. Craig Morris.
Good afternoon. On behalf of Summit Senior Life and our team, we really appreciate the opportunity and your consideration. We are a senior care developer. While I don't at times might have the energy of some of my friends here on the Avalon side, honestly, I have a deep passion for this use. My mom got Alzheimer's at 58. She had it for 24 years. I've lived with it for a long time. So our whole team has a passion for this type of use and taking care of this kind of facility for the community and the cities in which we develop and operate properties. We originally became very intrigued with the property simply because of the difficulty of this property, the legacy of the property, and really the opportunity that could be transformed into something that would be terribly beneficial for the city and is much in need. Our project, we did our best to set aside a park on the corner that we would allocate back to the city to retain every one of the buildings that we possibly could. I think there was a notation that we would take one building out. I believe we would leave that in. And then we would build a senior facility on the development side of the property. So in tying all that, we tried to, in the existing buildings, we would convert those, retrofit those into independent living. The new building would be for assisted living and memory care. The property would have access to the public, subject to safety issues at night for our residents. But we felt that we had provided a very good solution to the property and something that we're very, very good at. One of the big things for us in a situation like this is collaborating with you and the residents and the community and the neighborhood. We have continued to look at our site plan since we submitted in August. Is that when it was submitted, I believe? It's been a while, huh? And at this point, and even based on comments that we heard this morning, we would probably pull the building back and reduce it in size. I heard the comment about two-story on Hermosa. That's easy to do for us. So we pride ourselves on being able to work with the neighborhoods and the people that live in the area and come to a design that works for everybody involved. Because it's the designs of these buildings are very fluid. There's some hallway type of natures that need to be kept, but because of the nature of this site and it being irregular, we would have to sit down and spend some time and figure out what is the best design for this building. We put the parking underneath to reduce that. Our trip counts are terribly low. Generally, you don't want a lot of, we don't have a lot of cars other than the employees. So we made every effort to allocate this to, to support what it has been, to put residents on the site, to continue the use of the existing buildings, and to bring something new to the community that's first class and very, very much in need. So, any questions?
Thank you. Questions?
Sorry.
Mr. Garpedia?
You mentioned memory care, so this is a portion of the facilities for Alzheimer's care?
Yes.
Okay, and the facility is going to be gated, closed, off, or? No, usually the memory care, usually you have a segmented area for outdoors so they can walk and visit with their families, or you basically build it as a square with an open center. Got it.
But so the memory care would be blocked off from the public, both inside and interior and exterior, just for safety for the residents.
Sure, I understand. But the rest of the facility is going to be like active seniors that they're going to live there. Is it going to be open or is it going to be gated as well?
It's going to be generally open. You will have clearly locks on the doors and exits on that.
Got it.
The building itself is assisted living, and the units that exist now would be independent living. It's just a different level of care.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much for your proposal. Next, Brook Street. Rich Noland.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Rich Nolan. I'm a partner at Brook Street, and here on behalf of my partners at Brook Street and the Lab Holdings to represent our project for the Rockhaven property. Ms. Sanchez did a great job at giving an overview of our proposal. We are looking forward to a day on the 15th where hopefully we can get a lot more detail and to go over our proposal. But there are a couple things that we'd like to talk about. Number one is you have a great choice ahead of you. I'm very impressed by all of the competition, the great ideas. I mean, mental health, substance abuse, memory care. I mean, I can check myself on a couple of those anyways, of being a great use and certainly something needed. We are, however, looking at this as a really great entertainment cultural destination for Glendale. And there's a couple things just to talk about that. Our proposal, as you've seen today, is really a reflection of what was in the RFP. So we put together a proposal. We did a lot of research of what was happening in Glendale. but it's just a concept proposal, as Ms. Friedman had mentioned. Our idea would be to work with the locals, the neighborhoods, the stakeholders in the areas to collaborate on something. Our process and vision is really to be transparent and try to really pull out the best in Glendale, the best for Rock Haven, that can really enhance the entire neighborhood and the entire Montrose shopping area, for that matter, as well. We look forward to them. Tonight, I'm hoping that people in the audience, if you have questions about our proposal, we haven't talked to a lot of you, but we are open book in terms of talking to people to get the best ideas out there. We know we don't always have the best ideas, but we know they're out there if you have open ears to that. Second, what's very important to us, and especially with this property, but it really goes to everything that both Brook Street and the lab work on, is really trying to be authentic to the local culture and history of an area. It's really fascinating when people look at LA and they see this vast sprawl. But when you go from town to town, every place has a history that is unique to themselves and people really dig in and get proud of. And what we like doing is finding that history and what makes that city tick. Why is it there? What made it a great place to begin with, and what makes it great today? And really trying to dig down into that and find the vibe of what this property wants to be. So as part of that process, we really work at trying to understand the culture and history of the local area that we're working in. And finally, very important to us, this kind of concept of this boutique entertainment thing, it's what we do. Between Lab and Brook Street, some of the most iconic communities in California, including the Lab, the Packing House in Anaheim, the Napa Valley Wine Train. These are all projects that we currently own and operate today. We see the Rock Haven property as something that also could be very iconic for the whole region, but especially Glendale. And we look forward to working with you. The designs of Rock Haven are our own designs. We do in-house design. We finance our own projects. We are a pretty much soup to nuts developer as well as an operator on these things. So we don't go out there and cobble together a bunch of people to pull these things off. We have an internal core group that does this thing, and obviously as part of that there is collaboration with consultants and vendors and community stakeholders. So we think this property, we got really excited when we did the site tours and we started looking at the history. It's something we'd love to be involved with, but I don't envy your position up there. You have a lot to look at tonight, a lot to think about, but we appreciate being here and look forward to coming back hopefully on the 15th to meet with you again with more details.
You questions?
No, I just want to. We visited a couple of your sites a few months ago, and I think Packing House was top of the line, and we really appreciate your proposal as well. So.
Thank you.
My question is about the housing. Do you have housing at any of your other?
No current ones, but most of them we are introducing housing into them. Actually, the missing piece to many of these is the housing component. So it's also workforce housing. It's for anybody in the locker. These are very small. I think they average 700 square feet. In keeping with the historical nature of the old Glendale, Pasadena bungalow courtyards. These are single-story, small homes, relatively affordable to compare what you can find in the neighborhoods, and where people, the shop owners, can live there, but it could also be people in the area. So it's an idea of trying to create really a holistic community of not just retail, not just entertainment, not just residential. We even have, to some degree, health and wellness as part of our proposal, very much in all of our projects, yoga studios and other health and wellness type of things that go through this. So it's more of a holistic approach. I don't know if 24 is the right number or not, but we think there's a component to it that could be very important and really just create a better kind of place for the property.
Any other questions? Thank you so much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Nolan. Let's see. Final, let's see, that was Metro, Art Simone.
Good evening, Mayor Devine, council members, and staff. I'm Art Simonian. I'm the developer for our proposal. As you all know, I'm the principal of Metro Investments, also a licensed architect, and we appreciate your time. I also have with me John Lacasio, who's part of our team. He's the principal of Historic Resources Group. They're historic consultants, and they were actually the group that placed Rock Haven onto the National Registry. And they're going to be working with us very closely. The intent is for them to assess the historic significance of the property, at the same time to identify character features of the buildings, and at the same time work with us to visualize a plan, because they're architects as well as historic consultants. As you also know, based on our drawings, Dwayne Border, landscape architect, is also part of our team, and they specialize in creating urban infill parks and gathering places. Last but not least, our retail partner on this, Pasco Development Company. They are currently developing a project with us in the North San Fernando Valley of 364 units. They're a great partner. More importantly, however, is that they manage and lease over 1 million square feet across the country, so they're a great retail partner as well. As to Metro, you already know that we're part of the Glendale community. We've always been part of the Glendale development community. And as a family, we in fact developed the shopping center, the Coffee Bean anchored shopping center at the corner of Honolulu and Ocean View in Montrose. And so over the last 26 years, we've certainly seen Montrose Village grow and mature. With all our projects, we do a lot of community outreach, and this is no different. We're going to set up a community advisory committee, and this community advisory committee is going to consist of community leaders, some of which we've already met with, and they're going to be really acting as the board members for, say, our corporation. And the corporation is an analog. In this case, it's going to be the development. And so HRG, Dwayne Border, community members, all these folks are going to be part of our CAC, and through this collaboration, we're going to basically put a terrific project together. Our RFP is really based on the community's desires. The community wanted to reuse the existing structures on the site, which is exactly what we're proposing. The community also wanted to create a public park, which is what we're proposing. The community wanted public access to the public park and also to these historic bungalows, which is what we're proposing. And the majority of the community understands that the west portion of the site really needs to be developed to financially pay for these amenities, such as the renovation of the bungalows and also the construction of the park. As far as the possible uses on the west portion, we took a look at those very closely. We had a couple of rules for ourselves to make sure that it's least impactful to the neighborhood, that it's going to support Montrose Village, and that it's not going to compete with Montrose Village. So those were very important to us. So when we really looked at the uses that are possible out there, we knew a hotel would really create a lot of impact to the neighborhood. We did look at medical uses, and we knew that would be a lot of traffic associated with those, plus they would block out the public from using the facilities. We knew that a sanitarium would cut off public access again. We knew lifestyle retail. If we have the right partner, we could have developed the entire thing into a lifestyle retail center, but at the same time, that would compete with the village. And so the idea was to create housing, and the housing would be for sale housing, and that would be least impactful of it all. And we would create a lot of foot traffic, which would help the mom and pop residents along, the mom and pop commercial centers along Honolulu, and at the same time, it would perfectly dovetail and would help the adaptive reuse of the bungalows. So our residential, it's really intended for first-time home sellers, home buyers, and these first-time home buyers are going to be provided the opportunity to buy single-family homes at a set price. And so we're going to provide a lot of workforce housing, and that's the intent, and we're going to pay for the development that we are proposing. As far as our pro forma is concerned, it's real simple. If we're going to build the number of units that we're proposing, and if we are going to provide first-time housing, and we're going to set a certain cap rate on those, then we could really afford to pay $5.4 million for that land, of which, if we're going to use that $5.4 million, we could use $700,000 of it to build a park $4.7 million of it to do an adaptive reuse of the bungalows. A loan that was mentioned, we could ask for a loan. If a loan is provided for us, we could get the whole thing done faster. If not, we're perfectly willing to do it without a loan, in which case we would build the homes, sell the homes to first-time home buyers, and then start on the renovation of the bungalows. And so the community will get a public park, the community will get a community room, the community is going to get the Friends of Rockhaven clubhouse, and in so doing, the most important thing is that we'll get to renovate the historic bungalows and bring them back to life. So I'm available for question, and also HRG, which of course placed the building onto the National Registries here as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Questions?
Question. I don't know if this is the right time to ask about the first-time homebuyer program or first-time homebuyer. The prices was set. Is this the right time to ask that question, or we have to maybe?
I think that generally, depending on which level you're trying to reach, it would be probably low income versus moderate income, and there are set levels for that. We can provide that to you based on the county's adjusted median income to what the maximum sales price could be. Especially if they are, depending if they're condominium units or they're standalone units, that could have an impact on what the price basis is. But the idea being that it would be, I think the takeaway is that it is a first-time home buyer, and if it's subsidized because it's going to be low and moderate, because as Art had mentioned, it's workforce, that would be inferred, but that again gets worked out in that ENA.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Thank you. Matt Ganji for Ganji Development.
Hello, I'm Matt Ganji with Ganji Design Led Build, and I'm joined today with my father, Salvatore Ganji. I'm happy he's here with me today. I'm here to talk about Rockhaven Historic Park, which is our proposal. The city bought the property originally for a library and for community use. And so we worked with the community. I've been to many community meetings. When we originally were going forward with an RFQ, we had asked the community, well, could we have some housing or maybe some housing for veterans or some hotel use, some? And we heard a big no from the community, no housing, no hotel use. It needs to be open to the public as it originally was intended. So we worked with the community on what things would be supported, what uses on site. And we worked with the Friends of Rockhaven. We're the only proposal that has the support of the Friends of Rockhaven right now. We're proposing no new structures. We're not jamming any new buildings into Rockhaven, which is the most sensitive to the historic context. Growing up near Rockhaven, driving by, walking by, I always was fascinated by the buildings there. And we're opening the space up to see all of the historic buildings, so no structures in front or around. And so we're the proposal with the most open space, and what we would see in that open space are community events, art festivals, and weddings. And we're working with really, really incredible groups that do historic preservation. Joe Catalano, the architect with Eagle Restoration, has done hundreds of projects that are really incredible on the state and the National Registry. So everything at Rockhaven would be to the Secretary of Interior standards. I also want to talk about parking. Parking is a huge problem on and around Rockhaven. During the week, on a weekday, you can't find parking at Rockhaven. So we propose to restore the historic wall. And Catalano and Eagle recently did a restoration of a wall from the 1880s at a historic adobe, and that would separate the vacant parcels from the historic structures. And in the vacant parcels, we would have parking and some demonstration garden use. And which would deal with the parking problem, which is a huge issue. Also, just talking quickly about some of the uses, Gelsinger's Farm to Table. The Gelsinger family has been in the Montrose community since 1932. They started Gelsinger's. They want to do an exhibit of where our food comes from. Most of our programming has to do with the historic context of Rockhaven and learning and teaching and having field trips of people coming to the site and learning about our history, both Glendale history, state history, and Rockhaven history. So, seeing how food is grown and what kind of food was eaten here and being able to try that food in Gelsinger's Farm to Table restaurant. We also have Urban Press Winery, which is a sustainable winery that will have a glass upcycling program, connecting to the history of winemaking in the region, as shown in Duke-Majan Park. Because Rockhaven was by women, for women, it's a husband and wife team. Guylaine makes all of their wine blends, really incredible people. There would be the Friends of Rockhaven Museum that would lead tours, showcasing Rockhaven history and also connecting Rockhaven history to the city's history and state history. Theodore Payne would be working with Evergreen, our landscape architects. They've done a ton of work, Evergreen, also for projects on state and national registry. And Theodore Payne would be a consultant for drought-tolerant, local, native landscaping, and they were also interested in having a seed shop on site. We'd have women-owned businesses, boutique retail, different nonprofits like the CV Weekly were interested in being on site. One correction to the staff report: neither Dublab nor Poetic Research Bureau were tenants, but being a musician and artist in Los Angeles, their personal connections, and they would be arts consultants. Dublab does like this thing called tonalism, where they do sound therapy and sound workshops. So they'd be an art consultant, and there would be poetry readings. But there are arts nonprofits that actually were interested in being tenants, such as the Arts Institute. Mady Schutzman, sorry, I'll finish up real quick. Mady Schutzman, she's assistant dean at CalArts. She wants to teach classes on site, and there's kilns that would be there, and there would be artist studios and arts workshop on site. So I'm just about out of time, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Questions?
Just have a quick question. Mr. Ganji, in the projection, it indicates that you expect to have taxable sales estimated $5 million a year, and I'm looking at the lineup of the entities that would be, I assume, leasing from you. That's $5 million a year. It's a lot of money.
Actually, yeah, it sounds like a lot, but talking to the Gelsinger family, Kirk thinks that $5 million is his projection, and he's only one of our tenants, and he thinks that's conservative. So just from that one tenant, we could be providing, there would be 50,000 sales tax, but that's not including the winery and their sales tax, like the boutique businesses that will be selling goods, the art space and art galleries, artists will be there selling work, and that would all generate additional revenue to the city.
Okay, thank you.
My question simply, who's managing the property?
So we would be managing it, in collaboration with the Gelsinger family.
All right, any other questions? No? Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate that. Thank you for the proposal. Okay, having heard from all of the developers and proposers, it is now time to hear from the public. So let's begin. You each get 3 minutes. I'll remind you, 3 minutes. Please be respectful to each other. And we'll start with Barbara Petersmeyer.
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Petersmeyer. I live in a 12-unit condo complex directly across from Rockhaven at 2716 Honolulu Avenue. My husband and I moved there 16 years ago, just as the condo construction was completed. Every time I exit our garage or our front entrance, I enjoy seeing the historic Rockhaven wrought iron gate, and I'm familiar with the property as a volunteer. I go there whenever possible on Saturday cleanup days to sweep, rake, or wash the windows. Of the 7 proposals, all of which are very good, I favor the Ganji design-led build proposal the most. Its executive summary and development concepts seem the closest to the city's own stated goal of maintaining the site's historic nature open space and accessibility, compatibility with the neighborhood, and use by community groups. Ganji Design Led Build is a local company with a vested interest in Montrose, its needs, and its future. I like the fact that their proposal does not include creating any new structures, hotel, housing, or new buildings, but instead focuses on historic restoration and adaptive reuse of the existing buildings along with environmentally sensitive landscaping. Ganji's vision for the property as a community gathering place for all of us fits in best with the Montrose 2020 plan, and I think their Rockhaven Historic Park would be an excellent western highlight for the entire Montrose shopping center. I would like the entire historic site open for the public, not just part of the site, part of the time. I do have several concerns, however. None of the boutique retail proposals, except possibly the Ganji one, seem to have adequate parking. We barely have enough parking right now along the north and side parts of Honolulu Avenue from Pleasure Way to La Crescenta Avenue. Secondly, I'm concerned about noise pollution in the evening, particularly with proposed events like weddings, music festivals, and other types of outdoor evening entertainment. The entire Rockhaven property, with the exception of several small office buildings and a small auto repair business to the west, is surrounded by residential property, homes, condos, and apartments. Lastly, how would security be enforced if the property is sold? What kind of security will there be to maintain the historic park that is open to the public? Please address these three concerns when you make your final decision. Thank you.
Bruce Merritt.
Good afternoon, Mayor Devine, members of the council. My name is Bruce Merritt. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Glendale Historical Society, and I'm here this afternoon speaking on their behalf. As you know from our many interactions with the council and with the staff, our mission and our highest priority is the preservation of Glendale's historic resources. This is something that we consider to be one of the most important things for preserving the quality of the city and the quality of life of our residents. And certainly I think in that regard, Rockhaven is one of the most important assets that the city of Glendale has, one of the most important historic resources that we have. And I think the city council and the staff are to be commended for going through this process, which is a time-consuming, difficult process, but I think it represents your commitment to this preservation objective, and it's something that we certainly applaud. There are a number of good proposals that are before you now that you've heard about this afternoon, but from our perspective, we believe that the one that promises the best solution for Rockhaven is the Avalon retreat at Rockhaven. We think that it will accomplish all of the major objectives that the city wants: the preservation of the property, the preservation, the restoration, and the reuse of the property, public access, a museum that will highlight the historic significance of Rockhaven, the preservation of the trees, the compatibility to the neighborhood, which we think is strong. But I think the point I'd like to make that I think is key here is that historic preservation to be secure, in other words, the preservation of the past is only secure if the plan going forward in the future is viable and sustainable. And this is where I think Avalon brings the greatest amount of strength to this dialogue, because they have a track record of prior successes in protecting, preserving, restoring, and finding a viable new use for historic properties. Among the planners on this team that they've put together, which is an all-star team, they've had experience in the Bradbury Building, the Wiltern Theater, the Grand Central Market. But here in Glendale, and where we first as a society got involved and seeing how they work, was this Irving Air Chute factory in West Glendale. An historic building, an endangered building, and one that now has a renewed life. It's been restored in a way that respects its historic legacy, but also provides it with a long-term, sustainable, and viable future. This is key, and this is the reason we gave them the Historic Preservation Award for last year. We think they bring a deep-seated respect for historic preservation, but also a very down-to-earth, practical sense of economic reality, and that's what is going to be important for a long-term, sustainable, viable solution here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Carl Dursteling.
Good afternoon. I'm going to be real quick. Actually, I got 3 comments: parking, parking, parking. I mean, there is no parking 7 days a week, period. All of these proposals, especially this one, entertainment center, please. I mean, what are we going to do? Have movie theaters, restaurants? I mean, it's packed already. Where are you going to put these people? Underground? He's going to put it underground on top of a water well? Remember Echo Horizon? I mean, they broke the thing and all of a sudden water coming up, all right? Bingo. But now what? Now you got a bunch of flood and you're going to have a liability on your hand. Somebody came up with a trolley. You know how much a trolley costs? It's like $5,000 a foot. So he's going to make a trolley that goes from nowhere to nowhere? That's like fluff onto a print. Another one came up with 40 feet. They're going to give us 40 feet of open space. 40 feet is barely as wide as this room. And this whole thing is almost like 600 feet long. So that doesn't make sense. I mean, some of these things are very disingenuous. And I would also like to know, I've been there since 2007. You walk outside, people walk the street. Little girls walking to school. I mean, you don't see that everywhere in L.A. A lot of people have to drive their kids. And I think some of these things, alcohol and drug, psychological care, you're not going to see kids walking anymore. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Joanna Lindquist. Now, Joanne, I just want to make this clear. You're on the advisory board for the Ganges?
I just learned that today, apparently. Yeah. I mean, I know that they've been talking to us, but I didn't know that I was considered officially, or the Friends of Rockhaven was considered officially advisors.
On the advisor, as an advisor?
But I am speaking today as a lifelong Crescenta Valley resident.
Why does that make a difference, Madam Mayor?
Just listed as a consultant. Well, it's a consultant.
Oh, is she a consultant in the sense that they've been paid for it? I mean,
well, she's on the. In other words, there's a connection.
The Friends of Rockhaven is listed on the Ganges.
Part of the.
If I may, Madam Mayor, if she's here to speak as a resident, and that's okay. She's free to do that.
No,
I think the concern was speaking on behalf of the Friends of Rockhaven who are on the proposal, so that would be different.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, let's begin with the fact that this is public property, recognized as such by the state because they let us, as owners, place the property on the historic registry. For the last 8 years, it has been under the budget of the Parks Department. This means my elected representatives are considering selling public park land and are looking at plans that just don't get it. Many are proposing an Agnes Richards Memorial Garden or some such. It isn't just about Agnes. They don't know Agnes. It isn't even just about Pat, who operated it longer than Agnes did. It's about what happened there. It's about this being the last historically intact sanitarium in Los Angeles. All others were upgraded to keep operating or adaptively reused beyond recognition or public access. Most of these proposals plan to change too much of the historical elements that are left to be able to operate as modern businesses. We aren't concerned with the facades of buildings that you can see walking anywhere in Glendale or in Pasadena. We are concerned with preserving the integrity of the property, the feelings one gets there in these historic gardens, the beauty one sees in the old buildings, the evidence there of why people came to California for their health. If these businesses fail, this historic jewel has been altered permanently, and there is no going back. I have said that if this were private property, I would be pleased with whoever would want to honor what happened there, but it isn't. It's public property, something unique. In this moment, we have an opportunity to do something great, preserve and present to future generations more than just interpretive plaques of what trees and gardens and tiles would have looked like if you had just arrived a little sooner. Former council member Frank Quintero sat up on that dais and exclaimed how excited he was for all the city of Glendale to enjoy this space. Please don't lose this opportunity in the name of commerce. Give everyone an opportunity to experience the rest and rehabilitation at Rockhaven, whether or not they can afford it. And in a few moments that I have left, I would like to, as he says, call out Mr. Ochoa's declarations that the public knew about the library and historic access, community access to the property before it was purchased, that the fire station does need to expand, especially in this time of drought. And I don't believe that I would be able to answer a question about the Friends of Rockhaven not being able to come up with the funding before. So I will not address that. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
I suppose, Madam, we can have the fire chief come and address whether or not the station needs to be.
No need for
Okay, thank you.
No. Emily Lanigan.
Hey there. I'm Emily Lanigan. My family has resided in the Crescenta Valley for over 80 years. My daughter is currently the only child who regularly gets to use Rockhaven as a recreational facility. She is a 6th generation resident of the Crescenta Valley. I think that there's two things that are very important to consider when we look at the use of Rockhaven. The first is community. What does the community want? Over and over and over, the community has said, we don't want housing on Rockhaven, that parking is an issue, that noise is an issue. We want to enjoy Rockhaven for what it was intended when the city bought it, which is a passive park open to the community. Now, I don't think that there are many community members that are opposed to adaptive reuse, but adaptive reuse within the context of where Rockhaven lies in our community is very, very important to consider. I think that the other thing that is very important to look at is the long-term economic viability of whatever we put in there. There are things like a hotel that sounds kind of fun and fantastic, but a luxury hotel in a bucolic residential neighborhood is not necessarily something that is going to be economically viable in the long run. I don't know many people that are interested in paying $300 a night to stay in Montrose, as exciting as the Montrose Shopping Park is. Now, the Department of Economic Development has recently released their Montrose Vision Plan, which is great. That's something else to consider, and how Rockhaven takes part in that, as is the Far North Glendale Neighborhood Plan as well. So I appreciate the questions that you guys have asked, the thoroughness of which you have considered each of these propositions, and I just ask that you really look at where Rockhaven's place is in our community and what is the long-term economic viability. We've had a great proposal that has reached out to a lot of community stakeholders and residents, that has done a very thorough and fearless quest for who may be interested in using the property. We've seen other developers that have said they're interested in talking to local businesses but haven't made it that far yet. The Ganji plan looks really great to me as a resident and as a member of the board of the Friends of Rockhaven. Thank you.
Elizabeth Nelson.
Hi, it's Elizabeth Nelson. What I noticed when Glendale first bought that park in 2008 is when I became aware of it. There wasn't any other park nearby for youths. Young kids, particularly without their parents to drive them, can't get to Duke-Majan. There's no other considerable sized park in the area. And even families on weekends, maybe they aren't going to pile in the car. Maybe Duke-Majan isn't the kind of park they're looking for. There's nothing else to compete with, just a park, a plain old park, unless they go all the way down to Glendale Community College. That's a long drive. And of course, for the elderly and infirm, they might be able to walk or get wheeled across the street to Rockhaven, but they're not going to go anywhere else. Now, when the city first bought it, my husband and I, as members of the Historical Society of Crescenta Valley, we did maintenance and cleanup of the park, and we did that almost weekly until Friends of Rockhaven took over, and then we did it with them a few times a month. And we didn't do it because we were desperately looking for some other place to clean up or didn't have a home of our own. We did it because we wanted to maintain it the best we could as a park for the community. I don't have a lot of use for a park, and my husband and I mostly use Duke Majan. But the park that this could be and the historical site could be would serve all the people that are a lot younger than me or a lot older and less physically enabled, and to take this promise away from them when Ganji has done the very best job of anybody. I mean, he's been to all kinds of meetings, he's talked to all kinds of businesses, he's done everything but bend himself like a pretzel to try to be accommodating. And nobody else has gone as far and has shown as great a commitment to the community. So if when you consider all these efforts, you could either keep it as a county park as is, which wouldn't be optimum, or agree to the Ganji proposal, we would be really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon Thompson.
Good afternoon, Mayor Devine. Welcome back. And council members. As you prepare, I'm going to read this. As you prepare to make a decision on the RFP award of Rockhaven site, I hope you will consider a few key elements. And of the seven submittals. Now, if I put on my glasses, I can read. There appears to be a very clear view of what Crescenta Valley needs, and that is open space. Our valley does not need a boutique hotel, a residential home on the side, or very expensive private drug abuse recovery units or mental health related facilities on the Rockhaven site. They have their place, but not on Rockhaven site. The Crescenta Valley needs to hold on to every space available to rejuvenate one's mind, reflect, relax, meditate, and socialize as preventable medicine to hopefully stay off the need for a mental facility. It is important to maintain ownership of the land. If the site is sold to one of these companies, the Rockhaven history will be lost forever, and the park-like setting will vanish. I don't want to believe in the long run that this is what you want to do. You have stated publicly many times that the city remains dedicated to the site's historic nature, and you are very open to meeting with the public, which I hope we can continue doing, and we appreciate it. It's been a long and winding road getting to this point, and you should not rush. You should take your time and care in your decision of what you decide the Rockhaven future should be. As was quoted in one of the submittals, so much of our future lies in preserving our past. 5 submittals offer little or no Rockhaven historical vision. They want to purchase for profit for private use, and one offers a passive park, which has been spoken of 40 feet, very little green space for public use. 2 offer so much more. First, Metro Investments proposal comes very close to meeting the Friends of Rockhaven vision for the valley, but even closer on point is the Ganji design submittal with its kind and thoughtful planning for the site. Ganji has interpreted the vision of Agnes Richards in every segment and has met the city's requirements in detail. Their plans are in keeping with the North Glendale Community Plan and the Montrose 2020 Vision Plan. The construction period is comparable and will promote the least amount of disruption on our city streets and neighborhoods. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mike Morgan. Followed by Bill Weissman.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, City Council, City Manager. My name is Mike Morgan. I'm a resident of Glendale since 1955 and the Crescenta Valley since 1981, in which Rockhaven lies. which is actually in Vertigo City. I want to remind you that the Crescenta Valley kind of thinks of itself as a different entity. It's not just part of Glendale. It's part of the Crescenta Valley. So anyway, I came to speak briefly about the 3 items, about item 3 on Rock Haven. I would like to see the city council, before they adopt a final plan for Rock Haven, that allows the residents to have a chance to see and make their voice heard. In my own estimate, the residents would be interested in only 3 of the plans: Metro, Ganges, and Avalon. All have desirable elements, though only 2 allow the city to retain ownership of the property, and that to me is very important. To see a city park sold is not conscionable for that land in the future, as a park will be far more valuable than today. Unfortunately, I can't read my own writing. One is a boutique hotel, Avalon, filled with star power advisors, looking good on paper, and backed by the TGHS, the Glendale Historical Society, but actually, as mentioned before, sadly unviable in the Crescenta Valley. The TGHS would like to sell city parkland. I find very sad. That leaves only 2 proposals that satisfy the residents' concerns and the city's demands. And if money is not a complete concern, then those 2 are Metro and Ganges. But I also have to say, please allow the residents to have a voice before a decision is made, and please don't sell the future parkland. I also want you to know, which has been mentioned also, that the Friends of Rock Haven, not the Glendale Historical Society, nominated Rock Haven and is recognized on both the state and the Federal Historic Register. Only Glendale has failed to recognize Rock Haven on its own Glendale Register. Thank you very much.
Bill Weissman, followed by Mary Lynn Fisher.
Good evening, Mayor Devine, City Council members, city staff, and the public. My name is Bill Weissman, Far North Glendale, and I'm holding up the front page of the travel section of Sunday's LA Times, which has a picture of a woman who is a historical interpreter of the Women's Rights National Historical Park in Seneca Falls, New York. And the tagline under the photo says, "Women made many contributions to America, and yet those contributions were often slighted. Please let us not slight the contributions of the women who created and ran Rock Haven." I would like to repeat something that the previous speaker said. I also am of the view that, well, actually what Joanna Linkhorst said was that from the beginning, and this I include Sharon and myself in this category, what we've been consistent in saying what we've wanted, and what we've always wanted was a publicly owned park owned by the city of Glendale where the buildings and the grounds are accessible to the public. And they say that you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you might find you get what you need. So if I can't have a public park owned by the city of Glendale, and there needs to be some compromise, I would agree with the previous speaker that, and in this order, the Ganges, Metro, and Avalon proposals are the ones that make the most sense to me. I understand Councilman Najarian's issue regarding the purest use being a mental health or rehab use. The big problem I have with that is that that precludes public access to in most cases, to the buildings and grounds. And that's one of the things that's most important in preserving. Need to give a lot of credit to Ganges and Metro and Avalon, because they all came and gave presentations to the community. We all had a chance to talk with them and ask questions, and they listened to us and took our feedback seriously. But it really is the Ganges proposal that comes closest to what I believe most of the Friends of Rock Haven want. In summing up, I do want to mention one factor in this whole situation that I find highly ironic, and that is that the Glendale Historical Society, some of whose members are engaged in legal action against the city of Glendale to keep the Aloft Hotel from being constructed, are perfectly willing to have a hotel constructed in my neighborhood when they don't want one in theirs. Thank you.
Okay, Mary Lynn Fisher. Now that we got that out of our system.
Get down to it.
Good afternoon, Mayor Devine, City Council members, and staff. My name is Mary Lynn Fisher, and I'm sorry I have to follow that act, but I came here today to listen. I wanted to learn how the staff evaluates the 7 very different proposals for the Rockhaven site. Actually, I hope that after more than 2.5 months after the proposals were submitted, we would have a staff report that we could read and study with or without a recommendation. These proposals require a lot of time and attention to master, but a few things are clear. Most of the proposals want to purchase the property for the same or less than Glendale paid for it in 2008. Considering how property values have risen since 2008, that doesn't sound like a very good deal for the city. Selling the property or any part of it would be a mistake. One might even call it a breach of trust. Even without its historic significance, this is a unique property that can be preserved and modernized to give area residents a valuable gathering space. But how can the city ensure preservation and public access once the property is sold? It seems that every time I turn around, I learn of a new housing development somewhere in the North Glendale, La Crescenta, Montrose area. And they're all multifamily condominiums or apartments, not single-family homes with yards. The more condominiums and apartments that are crowded into the foothills, the more vital it becomes to have public spaces where residents can meet, relax, hold special events. Of the 7 proposals, only one, the Ganji proposal, will provide such a public space available at a modest cost to the public while allowing the city to retain the control that ownership provides. Thank you.
Very much.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I have a question of staff. So can you just clarify, because I guess that I maybe didn't read some of these correctly. So with the Ganji and the Avalon, does the city retain the ownership of the sites?
The Ganji proposal looks at either a sale or a lease. The Avalon proposal contemplates a sale, but again, in the context of the ENA, if you were to go with either and decided that you didn't want to sell property, well, then that changes those terms. Again, what we're looking for is a concept. If you said, we absolutely positively do not want a hotel there, okay. If you say, I'm intrigued by the hotel, I'm willing to walk down that road, but the sale is a non-starter, when you direct your negotiators in the context of the ENA, we would say you got to change those terms. By the same token, the lab has units, and they are offering to pay $2 million. If you say, wow, I really like the lab because I like what they've done, their experience, but I don't want any housing, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that they would say, fine, we'll drop the housing, but we don't want to pay anything for it either. In fact, maybe it's a lease, and we'll capitalize it some other way. So again, the idea here is to look at the concept.
So you're saying don't get hung up right now on connecting a sale with some of these projects, because it's possible you could just say to them, we love the hotel, for instance, but we don't want to sell it, or make that. So we're thinking about use, but also then going down and negotiating as part of the process.
That's why it's an exclusive negotiating agreement. And after, let's say in the context of Avalon, the TOT is enough of a return that you say that's fine. We don't need to get anything else for that site in consideration of the restoration, the open space, or whatever the case might be.
And that's because in the RFP, we never told them whether we wanted to sell it or not sell it, so they were kind of guessing.
That was a discussion that the council, if you go back to the tapes, you as a council really were uncertain about what you want to do. There was quite a bit of debate, discussion, divide as to whether or not you would support a sale of property versus a lease.
For the Ganji proposal, then, they proposed either one. They said either we'll buy it or we'll lease it.
That's correct.
A little unclear. Okay, thank you.
I have a question as well on just a follow-up question, because we were briefed on this item today, and my understanding is that at this point, none of the applicants can change the terms of their proposals, because they know what the others proposed already. And just to be fair to all of them, we said that none of them can change their proposals and say, I drop the housing, or I add housing, or like any of them. Ganji cannot come tomorrow and say, look, I want to add housing and pay you $2 million. Or others will say, I'll drop housing, or I want to increase my number. I thought the terms are the terms, and they cannot change it at this time until we give an E&A, and then we negotiate, whoever that is. We haven't decided anything today, so this is just information. And we're getting as much information as the public is getting, and all of you are getting. So I thought that's my question.
That's generally correct. What we didn't want to do, the council had asked that we release all of the proposals, so we do that. And because all the developers may be looking at one another's the proposal, because they hadn't seen them before, and may say, wow, I want to borrow something that's there, in the spirit of good faith and good sportsmanship, would be don't come up to the podium and say, this is what I'm going to do for you now, because then it puts the staff in the position of saying, that's not what you told us, that's not what you said. Now, as I said just a second ago, if you, the best one I think I can draw as a distinction would be Lab Holdings and Ganji, because they're in my view, they're very similar projects. One has housing, one doesn't. One offers a cash payment, one doesn't. But they're similar in many ways. If you said, well, I want to go one way or the other, I like the NGO version, the non-governmental organization, the nonprofit version being Ganji. You really like that part. But you know what? You need to generate something back to the city somehow, some way. And housing would not be as anathema as some might suggest. Well, then maybe in going forward that E&A, as we negotiate and you give instructions to your negotiators, you would say, well, we want you to add housing to that because we want to generate some kind of return, or we want some assurance. Right, so it's a little bit of both.
I'm sorry, but that is after the E&A is issued, not before. We are not going to go back to all 7 of them and say, okay, now you have a chance to come back with another proposal.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely, you would not do that.
Okay, that's what I was.
In other words, we want, as to which entity the city goes into an E&A with, we want the proposals to be considered on the strength of what they've actually proposed. After that, during the E&A, it's a much more flexible situation, right?
Most definitely.
Okay.
Well, also, the other thing is, we didn't ask them for a full-fledged proposal. We didn't ask them to present all of that because we're still going to be going into an E&A. So that just means that it means negotiating. So we can still negotiate terms. We can negotiate whether we want. Yes, we can. That's what an E&A is. It's
I mean, after the E&A is issued, yes, you negotiate terms. That's what the E&A is, but not before the E&A is issued.
Right now,
of course.
Right now, we're looking at these proposals as they are. So we're going to consider them based on their merits, as they are, not as to what the universe of all possibilities is. That's where E&A comes in. That'll happen when we've actually agreed on an entity to go into an E&A with the city.
So that's why what council had directed was, let's put all of this out in public. So you have a staff report, you have the matrix, as well as the community does, that summarizes all of these. That was part of the packet that's online. You've been able to look at this, peruse it, you get it all here, and then not tomorrow, not next week, but in 2 weeks' time, we're asking you, which concept do you like? Or if any.
I tell you, I have a complaint about this briefing process because it seems like the council was prejudiced in the sense that I think Mr. Wiseman said that the community got briefings from some of these, Ganges, Metro, Avalon, and great, I'm happy about that. The more briefings you get, the better. But we only get the information like recently, and I get a briefing an hour before the meeting. It's a little unfair.
Well, but you also have the opportunity.
It's a rhetorical point I'm making. You understand. But how many? So someone made a point about there being a lot of development and multifamily unit, project developments in far north Glendale. How many have there been in the last 3 years? I can think of 2 tops.
The only one I can think of is the one that Mr. Simonian, Metro, won tremendous applause for by his engagement of the community.
A month ago, right?
A couple months ago, and that was a precise plan of design at the old Mix property.
How about the Pennsylvania? And that one didn't even pass, right? The Pennsylvania project was Mr. Ganges had
that Ganges project, and that was Mr. Ganges' project. Again, doing a tremendous job of outreach with the community, and that project moving forward hasn't experienced the torches and pitchforks that we're being overrun by density.
But that was one of the projects.
Those are the 2 that I would think of.
Okay.
I mean, when you look at acreage, for example, north of the 134 freeway, you know that there's 2.2 acres per 1,000 resident, whereas south of the 134, there's 0.3. In this general area, there's Montrose Park, La Crescenta Park, Dunsmore Park. There's quite a bit of open space in that area, and so despite that, what the council had directed, in your criteria that I think tells the tale of the tape as to what your expectation was, which maybe explains the degree of outreach from the proponents to the community in explaining what it is that their vision was and how it aligns, is first and foremost preservation, historic preservation. Next, open space and accessibility, and then the rest of the criteria. That, if you recall from your approval of the RFP process, and we heard some folks that came forward to testify about that, they had to grudgingly admit that the council understood what the priorities of the community were, and you see that in these proposals. And in fairness to the Cliffside folks, the Summit, the Hook folks, understand that they were part of that. At least the Dr. Pilko and Dr. Hook, they were part of that original RFQ process. They had heard that discussion as well. So while some folks may say that they don't want that medical use, that's fine, but don't think that they're not being heard by the people that took the time to propose on this and spent a lot of good faith as well as money to make sure that they give their best cut to the city council.
If I may, one more. Mr. Ochoa, during some of the comments, you seemed to disagree. Would you like to address anything that you disagreed with?
I would just tell you, in fairness to the Glendale Historical Society, who was part of that ad hoc committee, as was members of CV, as was members of the Friends of Rockhaven, whether or not they claim to be on part of the Friends of Rockhaven vis-a-vis the proposals. We, going back to 2014, had indicated that we would list this on the historic register, state, federal, local, once the project was ultimately realized. Once you knew what you were going to do and everything was locked down, then you would move forward with the historic designations. To claim somehow that it was done to the city as opposed to for or with the city is a little bit disingenuous, I would argue, because everybody who was part of that process knew that was always the intention. And as I say, in fairness to the Glendale Historical Society, just because they decided to play by the quote-unquote rules that had been established at the outset, and they knew what the expectation was, they ought not be penalized or thought the lesser of simply because they didn't jump out first with the flag and say, this is what I'm going to go do. Everybody had every intention of listing this, and you've heard some of the folks say it's going to be to the Secretary of the Interior Standards. Well, yeah, of course it's going to be to the Secretary of Interior Standards. That's what happens. You don't get an extra gold star for doing it that way if you're going to go list it, and we intended to list it.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I just want to say the summary matrix was very helpful to me. It was a great presentation. I want to thank you because this was last minute, yes, but this really helped me to digest some of the information that I got today.
And I'd like to see something very similar to that for, even before the 2 weeks is up, so the council has a chance to really dive into the minutia of all of these, and is there a deadline for the public to voice their opinions on, so that we can get all of their comments before we kind of look at the information, the questions?
I would suggest that everybody continue emailing us. What we've gotten thus far are less questions, more statements of support for the various projects. Everybody has a horse that they're riding. Keep sending it in. It all becomes part of the record. If you want to meet, we can meet, but it seems people want to do it at their convenience, so they email. That's all well and good. If it's the council's directive, we can produce the staff report, which would be somewhat similar to this report, earlier, and you could see the evaluation and how that was done by the selection committee that included staff from Community Services and Parks, from GWP Water, from planning, from other community development divisions, including historic preservation, as well as Darlene and her team. So it's, at this point, it's been a long time coming, so that information is almost ready to go out.
Right. Well, this is a difficult decision for all of us. I know that, and we want to make sure that whatever we do, it is good for the city, good for the community, and maintains the integrity of that location. So whatever information we can get prior to the 15th, I think we would all appreciate that, so that we can make the right decision, a good decision. I think Councilmember Friedman.
I was just going to say that I commend the city back in 2000. When was it? When they bought the property? 2008. Yes. For buying this property when it was threatened, and it was threatened with, I believe, demolition at the time and reuse. And so I wasn't here then, but it was good for the council for hearing the community and purchasing the parcel. And I think that now, after going through this process for a couple of years, we were right, I think, to pull back on the original RFQ. I don't think it was really fully formed in terms of our mind and the public's mind about what this could be. And I think that now we have some pretty exciting proposals on the table, things that could be really good for the community and really good for the site going into the future. And there's so much love for the site, as you can see from the public that came in. And I think that they're starting to see now this vision sort of becoming a reality and becoming real. So I want to thank everyone for participating in the process. And I think we've got some good proposals. We do have a tough decision to make, but that's the good news, that the last time it kind of came through, I think a lot of us saw some of those proposals and went, ugh. And I don't think that we're feeling that right now. So I can't wait, looking forward a year or two to seeing what this property becomes, because it's going to be finally the community asset that we've all wanted it to be for so long.
Anyone else? Okay, so this is a note and file. I want to also thank the developers for coming and expressing your desires and your vision of on this project. I want to thank all of the residents that came to speak, and I encourage everyone that's watching to please let us know what your choices are, what your opinions are, and with that, we'll note and file. Do I need a motion?
Make a motion.
Note and file. Okay.
Second.
Okay. No motion. No motion. Next item. Oh, excuse me?
The note file needs a vote.
Oh, it does need a vote. Okay, it does need a vote.
Move the item.
Move the item. Second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Garpetian.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Sinanian.
Yes.
Mayor Devine.
Yes. Next item.
Move we adjourn?
Next item would be adjournment.
Yeah, move we adjourn.
We are adjourned.